So remember they had gotten that big mansion in Vancouver. They were supposed to go to Christmas, but then they decided that their mental health was too fragile to be around the family for Christmas. So they decided that they would go to Vancouver. And while they were there, they just sat there and simmered angrily about how they had been abandoned, about how the palace wasn't running after them. This is what they're like. They have pitched fit after fit after fit. They are like the couple who always has drama between them, and there's always one or the other is always running out the door and waiting for the other one to come after them. That's Harry and Meghan. They run out the door and they're waiting for the palace to come after them, and the palace is like, thank God. I've been waiting for this these many years. So when the palace doesn't come running after them, offering up the world to them, since they've offered up the world to Harry and Meghan time and time again. Finally, the palace is like, no. If that's really what you want, go. Just go. Meghan is fuming. She's raging. Together, the two of them are convinced that it's, they've been bullied, pillared, and abused. And abandoned was the sentiment that Meghan soon adopted. The negotiations for their departure, she decided, would not be discreet. She wants the whole world in on her sob story. God forbid she quietly deal with her own drama. Look, if she wanted to leave the royal family, if it wasn't what she thought it was going to be, fine, whatever. Leave. But why does the world need to be dragged into this? These are family problems. So deal with it in your family. The whole world doesn't have to know about all of this, except for the fact that you are so self-consumed, you assume the world wants to know. But we don't. All right, well, her Los Angeles office is, as always, whispering sweet nothings in her ear, promising her the world, and her Sussex brand is going to be everything if she could just, finally get to America. And they tell her that she and Harry are going to be as popular as the Obamas. See, but no, you won't be, because the Obamas have skill and talent, right? Regardless of what you might think about their politics, those two know how to work a crowd. They know how to be likable. They know how to get people on their side. They're well-spoken. So Harry and Meghan, to come out and believe that they are going to be the next Obamas, why would they ever think that? What have they ever offered the world in any capacity? Well, but, they believe their own BS. So somebody else's BS, just pile it on. They'll have a plate of BS for dinner. Their first step would be a major interview with Oprah Winfrey, who we know has been waiting in the wings for quite a while now. And she sees, it's only going to be a few more minutes before I reap the benefits from this lost couple. Together with Harry, Meghan intended to broadcast her frustration about the royals' crusty conservatism. It offended her can-do culture and the American dream. In the propaganda battle, Meghan expected Hollywood to defeat the Windsors. Her publicists had produced an artful video to be shown on the Sussex royal website after the divorce was announced. Highlighting their lives during 2019, the couple thanked their 10.8 million followers for their continuing support and assured them that they would be collaborating with the Queen by pursuing a progressive agenda. As is typical with these people, they use words without defining them. Your progressive agenda, what does that mean? You mean you go out and make money on your name? Is that what is progressive? You go out and act a fool and try to get deals and try to live off the fat of the land that other people have created? Is that what you mean? Is that what progressive is? Define what you're saying. At the same time, the Sussexes also composed their proposed public statement announcing their departure from Britain. Harry believed that his family would accept their demands. But Harry's demands are ridiculous. It doesn't even illustrate any kind of compromise. So he calls Charles and says, "We're ready to leave, and we want to leave immediately, and these are the things that we want done." And Charles says, "All right, dear boy, that's fine, but you need to submit that in writing. We can't make this massive deal over a telephone call with you in Canada and me here. So please submit something in writing." So Harry does. These are the demands, all right? Listen to how ridiculous this is. Harry expected to retain their titles, privileges, and income while living in Canada. They wanted to keep Frogmore and enjoy round-the-clock protection, costing the British taxpayer annually about $2.5 million, and continue to receive $1.5 million in annual income from the Duchy of Cornwall. In exchange, they would occasionally return to Britain, but otherwise represent the monarchy from Canada. And some people said that Christopher Geit had told Harry he could do this. So this is kind of why Harry believed that this was an appropriate proposal. You know, and when Tom Bauer ever brings anything in, you know that, I mean, this is like him saying allegedly when something is completely and totally true. Christopher Geit, from what I believe, having read Tom Bauer this far and understanding his style, Christopher Geit told Harry he could do this and that he would figure out a way for Harry to do this. I think Christopher was probably ready to just wash his hands of this nightmare couple that had hoodwinked him time and time again. But he told Harry, sure, I bet we could figure something out. So Harry thinks that he's within his rights to do so, which is probably why later he's so angry that they say no, because Christopher Geit was supposed to be top dog here. Regardless, anybody with a mind can see that this is a ridiculous proposal. Why in the world should Harry get literally everything he wants and the palace gets nothing? That's not a compromise. How would the British people benefit from this? And how colossally self-obsessed and blind he and Meghan are to think that anyone would agree to this one-sided deal. We get everything we want at all times. Never, ever, 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 ever is anybody allowed to say anything to us. We are not going to do any work if we don't feel like it. And you all are going to be okay with it. Well, what do you think about that deal? We think it's terrible, Harry. We think it's a load of shit. All right, well, Charles got their proposal and said, let's get some more details here. Okay, because this little pack of foolishness that you've written is not going to cut it. So then Harry runs to his grandma. Granny, Danny said I can't have it. But I can have it because Christopher Geit said I can. And I think that Paul's being really, really, really mean to me. So what say, Granny? Don't you think it's fair that Meghan and I leave for our mental health? Well, the Queen was like, take it up with your dad, okay? You two figure this arrangement out. So between Harry's calls to each of them, because he's calling his dad, he's calling the Queen, he's calling William, he's trying to get everybody on board with his dumb plan. What he unwittingly does is make all of those people come together and say, you know what, this little joker is the bane of our existence. How do we get him out of here? So they're all being united in their defense against Harry and Meghan. And while Harry thinks that he's, pulling the strings and being the puppet master here, and he's eventually going to get what he wants, he's only making everybody annoyed and mad at him. And they're all coming together being like, can you believe this guy? What's wrong with him? Just after Christmas, Harry's frustration increased. He heard that Dan Wooten for The Sun had gotten a tip-off that they were planning to leave the British royal family, like for good. And he'd never liked Dan Wooten anyway, because I think it was Dan Wooten who had written this stuff about the tiara. I believe that was him. And Dan Wooten does have sort of a smug way whenever he talks about Harry and Meghan. I mean, he has the dirt. He knows what kind of people these are. He always calls Harry and Meghan by like various sort of derogatory nicknames, That's kind of his style. And if you were Harry, who is just so sensitive to every little thing, you can imagine that Dan Wooten was like the last person he wanted breaking his news. So he was furious about it. And he told the palace that the palace needed to exercise some kind of draconian measures against The Sun. Tell them they're not allowed to print the story. Tell them that they are not allowed to say anything that Harry doesn't want them to say. The palace is like, do you not understand the way the world works? We can't just go around telling everybody what they can and can't say, okay? This is the free West, all right? So they do tell The Sun, well, you're misinformed. So that was all the palace was going to say. You're misinformed. That's not true. They're not leaving. That wasn't good enough for Harry. Obsessed with malicious forces in London, Harry was convinced that those in the palace leaking his secrets were intent on destroying his marriage and himself. Which, by the way, side note, how can some bad press destroy your marriage? Right? That's kind of an internal problem. If your marriage is being destroyed, that's because you two can't get along. That's not because somebody wrote a bad story. If you two are so united, like you want to tell us all the time, Harry, then bad press would only bring you, closer together. Unless, of course, the bad press is, revealing your wife's secrets, which you heretofore had never bothered to care about. Had you bothered to get to know her for, I don't know, like just a little bit before you got married, maybe so many of these stories wouldn't come as such a blinding surprise. But anyway, he could not imagine that Wooten's source might be one of the Sussex's many advisors in Los Angeles or Canada, right? I mean, any number one of these fat cats probably had something to say because they love that they have the scoop. And like, how many times has it been the Americans that have said something to the news under Meghan's behest? She's told them to do it. Meghan loves to leak. We know this. We know this from stories that her friends have given to the papers that, strangely and weirdly, those papers were never met with the lagacious side of Harry and Meghan whenever her friends have something to say. But Meghan is constantly leaking things. We know that's kind of her MO. So why in the world would now suddenly more information of their secret information be leaked? Why would that not be Meghan? Meghan has already said she wants it to be out in the open what's going on. She doesn't want to hide anymore. She wants the world to know that the Queen specifically has been abusive to her. 100% she probably told one of her people to leak the story. And then she turned around to Harry and was like, I don't know why everybody is abusing me like this. Is it because I'm half black? The mercy for Harry in all of this at the moment was that Dan Wooten was on holiday in New Zealand, and in his absence, he couldn't convince the Sun to run the story. The Sun at that time was going to play by the palace rules as long as Dan was gone. That's not going to remain a permanent situation, but for now, that's Harry's blessing. Harry and Meghan had to come back to England because they had obviously so many loose ends to tie up that they couldn't get their deals hammered out in Canada. So they came on January 6, 2020. Apparently the whole world was falling apart on January 6. Archie had been left in Vancouver. Harry planned to drive directly to Sandringham for dinner with the Queen. But to his dismay, he was told that the engagement was cancelled. He telephoned the Queen and asked for another date that week, but she replied that her diary was full. All right, well, he wrote all about this drama in Spare. And at the time, in the way he wrote it, he made it seem like it was very arbitrary, that the Queen had promised him one thing, and then some evil person had whispered in her ear and, given her some really bad advice and told her not to meet with Harry, right? So it all seems very nefarious and very fickle of the Queen, quite frankly. But regardless about why she canceled it, I mean, we have like one of two options here. One of them could have been that somebody did say, I don't think it's best for you to meet with him for dinner. He's just going to belabor the point, try to manipulate you, try to play you the whole time, pull the grandson card. You don't need to put yourself in that situation, right? Maybe somebody did say that. The Queen is a strong woman. I think she could have withheld. But also, she was elderly. But more importantly, and I think we have to take this into very serious consideration, we know that when she died of bone cancer. I believe that's correct. And how do we know that she hadn't started, various treatments that, she was going to be ill and unwell that week? I mean, I don't know what her treatments were, right? But I mean, chemotherapy takes you out like the week after you have it, you're out, and then you sort of like build up your strength until the next one, and then you're out again until, so it's like, how do we know what her physical health was at that moment? But I think we can kind of assume maybe she wasn't very well, right? Now, that's all supposition. But Harry's treatment of her up until the very moment of her death was so unkind that even had he known about her health, I don't think he would have cared because it was all about him. I mean, clearly we see the way he felt about his grandfather. He couldn't care at all about his grandfather's health when he went on Oprah. So I don't think it matters to him what his grandmother's health was at this time. So maybe it was her health. Maybe it was just simply that somebody did say, don't waste your time. If you're going to meet with him in a group. But he is manipulative. He's coming with Meghan. You don't want to spend your time that way. He couldn't get the Queen to agree to see him. So then he was transferred to Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary. And Harry disclosed that the solution to his reoccurring mental problems was to announce immediately their departure from Britain. Young asked Harry not to annoy the Queen by issuing his public statement before they met. At the end of the conversation, Harry believed that the Queen was receiving some really bad advice. Okay, well, but see, and this is the thing that is so annoying. Harry has been asked to please not bring drama up in front of the world before he and the Queen can meet. She said that she will be able to meet him, she just can't that week, right? But it's not like we're never going to get a chance to talk, just I can't right now. Well, Harry is over there, it has to be when I say, when I want it. Immediately, everybody has to hop when I say hop and jump when I say jump. So he is incensed and feels like he's being blown off for always an eternity, and he's going to have his say regardless. He won't listen to the wisdom of Young, who says, look, just hang on, okay? We're going to have a conversation in a minute. Just don't jump the gun and look like a fool. Please, Harry doesn't know how else to look unless he's looking like a fool. The following night, The Sun went ahead and published Wooten's exclusive. And the couple, Wooten wrote, planned to step back and live trouble-free in Canada alongside Meghan's many friends. And helped by Sunshine Sachs, they intended to launch the Sussex Royal Foundation. The revelation dramatized the Sussex visit that morning to Canada House to say thank you to the High Commissioner, Janice Charette, for providing sanctuary and protection. Sanctuary and protection from what? Is there a mob trying to gun them down? Is there some secret operative that's over here just looking to tie Meghan up in a back room and torture her, and Harry's got to come to her rescue? I mean, what exactly is happening here where they had to run for sanctuary and protection? Like, they act like there is some kind of underhanded mammoth operation against them, and that just by the grace of God, they managed to escape by the very skin of their teeth. Somebody help me with these people. I mean, I'm so over how immature they are about their own lives. Like, who could live like this? Convinced of the palace's plan to sabotage them, the couple decided to jump the gun. Of course they did. So despite the imminent negotiations with the Queen, their office issued this statement on the Sussex Royal Instagram website. All right, before I read the statement, do you guys remember back when we were reading Spare, and he talks about when they drafted this with all of their people in England, and all of them came into this, drawing room or somewhere, and they all worked like all night long on this statement, and everybody was like contributing, and they were taking turns at the laptop, like writing, and okay, let's edit this word, and like everybody in turn was helping, and then people were just like exhausted, and they would sit at the computer and type their few sentences, and then they would stagger over and like slump over on the couch while somebody else took the next opportunity to add what they could, and then that person would get up and like stagger over and slump into a chair, and this is like this battle with words as they fought to write the exact right thing. And there was all these minds coming together to write it. And, by the end of it, they had just been wrung out in battle. Do you guys remember this? Okay, let me read that statement to you because it wasn't provided in Spare and I wasn't going to bother to look it up. Well, we have it here. And the fact that it took multiple adults to write this is shocking. And it's proof that Harry that was a total BS story, because it would not have taken, 6 different adults all working together to write this statement. All right. They said they would be stepping back as full-time senior royals. All right. And they planned, here we are, to carve out a progressive new title within this institution and to balance our time between the United Kingdom and North America, continuing to honor our duty to the Queen, the Commonwealth, and our patronages. This geographic balance will enable us to raise our son with an appreciation for the royal tradition into which he was born, while also providing our family with the space to focus on the next chapter, including the launch of our new charitable entity. We look forward to sharing the full details of this exciting next step in due course. You could have written that half asleep, all right? I mean, what? That is the most bland, uninteresting, non-controversial statement. Right? So why did it take them all so much work that at the end of it, Harry went out to the Christmas tree that was still up and stole several of the Queen's ornaments to hand out as parting gifts for having been involved in this sort of coup? All right, this joker, I can't with him. Their statement was read by the world as intended, a deliberate challenge to the royal family. Their compromise of collaboration in a progressive future was, many thought, an insult to the Queen. Mentioning North America was intended to persuade the public that the family would be living permanently in Canada, not least because Meghan had earlier pledged that she would stay out of the USA until after Trump's gone. I mean, her and everybody else said that, but then nobody left. The saga now dubbed Megxit gripped the nation. Okay, so now we go on this long thing where everybody in the family is angry. William's angry. Charles is angry. The Queen's exasperated. Harry's mad that his family didn't immediately jump to attention and come and beg on their knees for, in forgiveness. Why Harry thought that his family would suddenly come to their senses after he did the very thing they asked him not to do. I mean, the reason they're frustrated with him is that he just continues to plow ahead and do his own thing. So why would this suddenly, him doing his own thing, suddenly spur them to action to be like, oh, you know what? You've driven us crazy with this thing that you do where you just plow ahead. But now that you've done it again, we get it. We understand why you keep doing it. No. So everyone's angry and everyone's upset. And now the media is calling it Megxit. which Harry said was a term of misogynistic abuse invented by pirates with press cards. Where does it come up with these words, these terms? Meghan's the one who tells it to him, and then he comes tottering out and says his little words like a parrot. In anticipation of the showdown, the Queen, Charles, and William and their senior advisors agreed that while they wanted to avoid appearing vengeful, British taxpayers would resent subsidizing the Sussexes if they avoided serious duties. They were also puzzled why a progressive royal would want the title Her Royal Highness, because progressives were committed to changing an unequal society. But frivolity aside, they agreed that the monarchy would not risk the Sussexes' uncontrolled exploitation of their privileges and titles. The thing that they were really worried about was that Harry and Meghan had repeatedly come out and said that they wanted to work to become financially independent in Canada. Obviously, everyone who had known Meghan for 2 seconds knew that money was at the heart of all Meghan did. And it seemed that they intended to monetize the monarchy. Looking through the Sussex royal filings in Delaware, officials were aghast that the couple intended to peddle pens and clothing under the Sussex royal logo. I mean, that really is trashy. I mean, really and truly. Pens and t-shirts and bandanas and, come get your koozie with the Sussex royal logo. I mean, it's just like, y'all, that is like a load of trash and then some. Here's the thing. Harry had inherited £27 million from Diana and from his grandmother. And Meghan had probably saved like $1 million from her career. So, I mean, that's like coming under $30 million. And, by any normal person's understanding, that seems like a good chunk of change to start life on. But when you consider the fact that neither one of these people have any skill level, it's not like they had any hope of being able to build on that with their own sense of industry. Their greatest hope was the koozie with the Sussex royal logo on it, being able to sell some pens and stuff. I mean, that was really all they had going for them. And this point has been made by every single person who's ever talked about Harry and Meghan, is that they have a connection to the monarchy, right? I mean, nobody cares about Harry and Meghan. So while that sounds like a big amount of money to any normal person, when you consider the kind of lifestyle they wanted to live, that was going to be eaten up in a year and a half. They need $10 million annually to make their lifestyle possible. And so, $27 million to get their life set up the way they want it, that's going to be gone tomorrow. I mean, they could easily spend more than half of that on the kind of house they want. So it's not surprising that they were in a bit of a panic, because they don't intend to live like you and I live, right? You and I can make that money last forever and then, even have some left over for the kids. Although, successful negotiations with Harry depended on striking a balance between keeping the Sussex loyal and preventing them from leeching off the British taxpayer. But the thing is, the options were not attractive, because either Meghan could be allowed to keep the privileges without the responsibilities, and nobody was okay with that, or they could just renounce her title and show her the door. But that was going to create blowback from all the people who had always said, see, you are racist. Harry will always be a prince, but now you're casting Meghan out into the cold. Because you can't take away from Harry what he already has, but you can take it away from the biracial American woman who's a divorcee. So you were always classist and racist and sexist against her. And this is the proof. So they were in quite a bind, the royal family was, and trying to figure out what to do next. On January 13th, Harry was finally driven to Norfolk to have his conversation with the Queen. Now, Meghan, by this point, had had enough. She was sick of it. She wasn't going to stick around. She went back to Canada under the guise that she needed to be with Archie. But in reality, she just, she'd made her couple of appearances and, she was going to go on home to the people who would tell her what she wanted to hear and treat her the way she wanted to be treated. The people who still stood to make a couple of bucks off of her, so were willing to put up with her BS. She goes on back to them. Harry finally has his meeting. He stays on to have the meeting. And when he arrived on the Norfolk estate, it's interesting, Prince Philip wouldn't even have anything to do with him. He got in the car and drove somewhere else on the estate. He wasn't even going to sit in this meeting. He washed his hands completely of the whole thing. Harry's request that Meghan take part in the discussions by Zoom was rejected. No, she can't. And the reason the palace said no was that they were afraid that Meghan was going to have other people listening on the line, other people taking notes, and they didn't expect that it would be a secure connection. So they said no to Meghan. That is crazy. I mean, not crazy on their part, but I mean, I agree that they made the right decision. But the fact that they would have to say that, the fact that they would have to bar Harry's wife from the negotiations that involved her because she has proven herself to be such an unreliable individual, I mean, that should have been, I mean, of course, Harry wasn't going to see the common sense in any of that. He wasn't going to ever agree that they were in the right. But if he had had any kind of ability to step outside of himself, look at the scenario like an outsider for just a second, he would have seen that this was a really crushing reality, that his wife had showed herself to be such a diabolical individual that they couldn't even include her in the negotiations because she was such an untrustworthy person and the source of all the leaks, right? They knew that Meghan would leak whatever was said in that meeting. There had not been a problem with leaking at the palace until Meghan came there. That has been documented over and over and over and over and over. So while Meghan and Harry wanted to point fingers constantly and continually, the truth is she was a common denominator in every leak that was had. So they said, no, Meghan, you can't come in at a Zoom call, no. And Harry writes in his book that he felt very abandoned in that moment because he knew that he could not stand up against, the panel of his family, with his father, with William, with the Queen, with her officials. And he felt like he was, going to a battle and he was the lone soldier on the opposite side. Anyway, he said in Spare as much that he might have gotten more of what he wanted if he'd been able to have Meghan there with him to help him explain what it was they were trying to do, but they just steamrolled him, according to him, and made it a really unfair situation where there was no one there to speak for him. But Harry, speak for yourself. Since you're so sure that this is what needs to happen, you should have been able to come in swinging. If this all made so much sense, like this was the only thing to be done, he should have been well versed in his own argument so that he could have come up against a table of 15 people and been able to defend himself. Those waiting for Harry at Sandringham, Charles, William, and their advisors, assumed that Meghan and Harry would be prepared to agree to concessions. They also believed that Meghan controlled Harry. In reality, he shared Meghan's uncompromising demands. Over lunch, Harry intended to persuade the Queen that they could serve the monarchy in a semi-detached manner from Canada. I want to know how they expected to do that. How did they expect to serve the Queen when in England they had had so few royal duties? What is he expecting the Queen to believe he's going to do when there's no one watching him or insisting that he do, at least a certain number of things? For Harry to think that the Queen is so daft that she's just going to be like, you want to do this job except in Canada? Okay, I can see that. How could she see that when you have done a terrible job in England of being able to do your job? For his part, Harry did not realize that he would be met by an ultimatum. Half in and half out, he was informed, was impossible. He worked for the monarchy, he was bluntly told. The monarchy didn't work for him. Moreover, they would not be allowed to accept payments as brand ambassadors for corporations. Police protection would also be withdrawn. Harry would subsequently claim that he had offered personally to pay for police protection. Surprised by his family's hard line, Harry concluded that their terms amounted to punishment. As he tried to negotiate a better deal, he remained aware that the British public was divided. While many supported the Sussexes' decision to leave the country, the majority opposed giving them any financial support or to them keeping their titles. Yeah, see, I think that's where most people felt. Like, nobody cared if he wanted to leave. He was kind of unimportant anyway. I mean, it wasn't like if William and Catherine had just decided to rise up and say, we're done, we're leaving. That would have been a tragedy. But for Harry and Meghan to be like, we want to skulk off to the shadows and do our own thing, fine, peace be with you. Now, we're not going to continue to pay for your extravagant lifestyle, and you're going to have to develop some talents. But if you're, willing to do that, Godspeed. All of Harry's language that he was putting out publicly, that would appear to be exactly what he wanted. We want to live our own independent lives, and we're looking to build our own financial freedom. All right, fine, go do it. But that is not at all what he wanted to do. In the, behind closed doors, he's over here aghast that people aren't going to continue to line his pockets and fill his wallet for doing nothing. What has the Queen done to deserve this shoddy treatment? Asked his son Tony Parsons, previously an author of the euphoric comments about the Sussexes on their wedding day. Let history record that no royal couple was ever as adored as Harry and Meghan. It is astonishing, unbelievably sad, perhaps even tragic, that millions of us will be happy to see the back of them. The newspaper condemned the Sussexes' obnoxious behavior and continued, "It's not just the family they've betrayed. They are grotesquely abusing the generosity and goodwill of taxpayers, too. They've decided to have their cake and eat it. They wanted all the money and privileges, but without the solid devotion to duty and hard graft that the Queen and latterly William and Kate exemplify. This is not how this institution works."